Welcome to the Self-Performance Strategies Podcast. Unlocking the secrets of self-performance so you can improve mentally, emotionally, and physically. The goal of this podcast is to help you create more freedom of time, money, and purpose. My name is Stephen, and I am your host. I believe there is always an easier way, and I am here to help you find it. Let's jump in to the SPS podcast. Hello, and welcome to the 14th episode of the SPS podcast of the Self-Performance Strategies podcast. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about fulfilling your potential. And I'm going to talk about a little exercise that you can do on a weekly basis or even on a daily basis that you can use to help you stay on the path towards fulfilling your potential. But then I also want to talk about the traps in life that will happen if you don't try to fill your potential, if you don't get on the path to really tapping into who you are and trying to succeed in the areas of life that you want to succeed in, really following your purpose and potential. But before we jump into that, obviously, as I love to do in every episode, I like to share a quote. And this one comes from Brian Tracy, one of the sort of productivity and performance grandmasters, so to speak, of the last sort of 50 to 60 years. And his quote really helps solidify what I'm trying to talk about in this episode. He said, "The potential of the average person is like a huge ocean unsailed, a new continent unexplored, a world of possibilities waiting to be released and channeled towards some great good." I really enjoy this quote because basically what he's saying is inside everybody we have all these worlds, all these continents, all these countries that we haven't explored in ourselves yet. We have so much potential. We have so many ways and routes to success in our own lives. And we may be shutting those routes down, those paths down, by not taking the time each day to really figure out what we're doing, why we're doing it, and moving towards our potential. I personally feel like trying to fulfill your potential is one of the most important things that you can do in your life. It's one of the most important purposes or one of the most important aspirations or goals that you can have is to challenge yourself to really push the lines of your potential, to get good at something and then get better and then get even better than that, to go from good to great. Now, before jumping into the traps and the reasons why I really feel like you should go after fulfilling your potential, I wanted to talk about an exercise that I do on a weekly basis that has really helped me stay on track. We all have the ability to tell other people how capable they are and to help them tap into their potential. We're very good at giving people that perspective in their lives through conversations, through giving them a pat on the back, from seeing their potential and telling them, you can do this. But you often lack the perspective or ability to see your own potential. We got blinkers on. We're like a horse pulling a cart back in the olden days with those blinkers on. We can only see what's in front of us. And we want to be able to see more than that. This is why it is vital to have big goals and to journal daily and to tap into your potential daily by asking yourself some smart questions. Now, I journal daily and nightly, but I ask myself this question every Sunday during my reflection period. And it's a useful question and an exercise to do. You ask yourself, what was the most significant struggle you faced last week? What was the most significant struggle I faced last week? That's what I write out. Then I answer that question, get deep into my struggles, get honest with myself. And once I have all my struggles out on a piece of paper in my journal, I then stop and ask myself the second question, which is, how would I advise a friend dealing with this struggle or these struggles? Now, this is a fantastic question. Questions like this will help you gain perspective quickly and will help you on your path to fulfilling your potential. Why? Well, what you're doing is you're giving yourself your own advice. You're saying to yourself, you're having these struggles and you're going to overcome them by doing X, Y, and Z. And often the best advice can be our own advice to ourselves but rarely do we actually listen to ourselves. Like, how many times have you given somebody, a friend of yours, fantastic advice, and then you thought, why haven't I done that in my life? Why don't I do that more often? It has happened to me so many times. And that's actually one of the funny elements about being a one-on-one coach, is you're giving people all this help and advice, and there's sometimes I'm giving advice to a client and I'm like, oh, I haven't been doing that lately. Recent story is I was telling a client they should go on daily walks, and then I realized I hadn't been on daily walks for about a month. And this is going back 4 or 5 months ago. But it just hit me that my identity in my mind was like, yeah, I go on daily walks. But when I actually asked myself that question when I was talking to my client after the call finished, I was like, hold on a second, I haven't been going on my daily walks. So it's kind of funny how helping other people can actually reflect back onto you. Oh, hold on a second, I should actually listen to my own advice. But going back to these questions, this is a great way to tap into your potential by listening to your own advice. I have always enjoyed the quote, success starts from within. And it's so true, because as we level up in life, we also have to level down in life. And what I mean by that is we've got to level down to who we truly are. We've got to level down to our true why, our true purpose, really figure out how we can fulfill our potential, because all success and all new levels in our lives start from an emotional change or a shift from within us. And that's why I want to talk about the traps that you can fall into if you don't actually go after fulfilling your potential. What happens when you don't take action to fulfill your potential? Life is a spiral at times. Sometimes you travel up it and other times you slide down it. When you work to fulfill your potential, you spend most of your time traveling up it. We do sometimes have to come back down to fix things before we can go further up, but you can continuously slide down into trouble when you don't work on fulfilling your potential. When you spiral down, you will experience these traps. Now, these experiences that I'm discussing come from personal experiences, and they come from the experiences of some of the clients that I've worked with one-on-one. So the first trap that you'll get when you're not going after your potential is you will lack motivation. When you're not moving towards your goals that align with you and your potential, you find it hard to get work done. You often work on things that you don't actually like doing. This is why you dislike busy work. This is why, as a business owner, you might struggle to move things forward because you're doing projects that you don't really love in your business, or you started a venture with somebody else. It doesn't really fit who you are, and it doesn't move you towards tangible results that you actually really want, and you find no joy in the work. This is what happens when you don't go after things that are in line with your purpose and your potential. You lack motivation and there's no joy in the work. So that's a big trap that you've got to look out for. And I've experienced that in my own life. Working on things, taking promotions, doing things that didn't fit who I was, but doing them because there was some type of material money component to it that I thought I wanted in my life. I was chasing it, and it ended up not being the right thing. And then I lacked motivation because it wasn't really in line with my potential or fulfilling who I could be. The second trap that will happen is increased stress. It slowly builds over time. Chronic stress doesn't happen overnight. It slowly builds when you're constantly working on projects you have no interest in, when you're doing things that you don't like. Similar to the death of 1,000 paper cuts, it will build slowly, and then one day you will snap. I don't know why I'm laughing at that point, but yeah, that's what happens. I've been there myself. You don't notice it, and then one day you'll just blow up because you've had those 1,000 days previous that have just slowly cut at you. You'll wonder, why am I here? How did I get here? Well, you got here because you weren't going after your potential. You weren't working on things that aligned with you. The third trap, which happens sequentially to the first two really, is that in response to the stress and the lack of motivation from not working towards your potential and working on things that align with you, you will look for cheap dopamine, TV, social media, movies, overeating, whatever that is, porn, etc., to distract yourself, to numb yourself. You will distract yourself with fun, quote unquote, activities. Air quoting as I'm saying that. I know you can't see me, but you get it. you, you will suppress your pain with this dopamine. You'll suppress your pain with this numbing, and you think you're relaxing and recharging when you're doing these things. You know, a lot of times people watch TV and movies and think, oh, this is stress relief. But when you're doing it in a way that is unhealthy, and you're doing it instead of working, or you're spending hours in this dopamine cycle on TikTok, on YouTube, on Instagram, or on Netflix, constantly just watching a full season of a show when deep down you know you should be working on something else, that is when you're in a bad place. And that's when you're using social media, you're using fun, you're using hedonistic activities as numbing agent rather than using them as enjoyment. Now, if you're watching a movie with your partner, with friends, if you're hanging out with people and you're on social media and it's all good fun, that's healthy. But when you're using it and you know deep down that you should be doing something else, that's unhealthy. The next trap I want to talk about gets a little bit deeper and darker, and I'm going to use the word addictions here. Addictions don't happen overnight. They come from unresolved pain in life. I've gone through that myself at different periods in my life. In my early 20s, I had substance abuse issues with alcohol and partying, and all of that came from suppressing the pain in my life, not facing up to reality. The more you suppress the pain, the worse the addictions can get. Porn, drugs, drinking, abusive behavior can become coping mechanisms to avoid the pain of unused potential in your life. I've 100% been there. Maybe that's a deeper conversation for another podcast episode. But when you're not working on your potential and you lack that motivation and you have that increased stress and you start using cheap dopamine to numb yourself, you will end up, or you very quickly can end up, using alcohol and other substances as a numbing agent because TVs and movie and food aren't doing it for you anymore. And that's a bad place to be. And that's where I deeply think that we should all be reaching after our potential and doing things that align with us and going after our dreams, because when you do, you are set up in a way that these types of addictions, this type of numbing is removed from your life. I'm not a therapist. I'm just talking about my own direct experience here. And if you have any problems with addictions, please go and source professional help. The next one I want to talk about, the next trap that happens, and these are kind of sequential because, you know, when you get into stress and lack of motivation and cheap dopamine and then unfortunately addictions, it can end up causing major relationship trouble for you. When you don't fulfill your potential, when you have no direction in your life and you seek cheap dopamine, leading to coping mechanisms, you will push loved ones away. You will find it hard to develop loving and meaningful relationships. Not a fun place to be. Been there myself, had relationships break up because of my bad behaviors in the past. Been there myself by not treating the struggles in my life. And again, if you're in that kind of place, repeating the point I just made on the last one, seek professional help, hire a coach, hire a therapist, and work to get out of those problems. The next two I'm going to talk about lead on to this, and this is getting quite dark, this podcast. This episode's taking a spin for the darkness. But the next one I want to talk about, then following on the last one, are anger and depression. Anger is something that I suffered with a lot in my 20s. You become angry at the world, but you're really mad at yourself. That's the honesty here, that you're really mad at yourself. The only way to overcome the anger of not moving towards your potential is to take 100% responsibility for your life. And I can tell you, for a long period in my life, I did not take 100% responsibility. This is the moment you suck it up and realize it's all in your hands and you can only control what you can control, and you control your thoughts, your actions, and your words. So you start working to improve that. And that's a cornerstone of self-performance right there. This is the SPS podcast. This is the Self-Performance Strategies podcast. And one of the major cornerstones is taking 100% responsibility for your life. The final point I want to talk about, and then I'll try to wrap up this podcast with a happier tone, is depression. It's hard to admit, but if you've spent months or years dealing with any of the points I've brought up in this podcast today, you may have some level of depression. You may have some level of darkness, pain that you need to go and figure out and overcome. But with awareness, with the awareness of seeking help, with the awareness of thinking about these things, with the awareness of listening to podcasts like this, comes the ability to do something about it. When you have awareness and you start calling it out, you can pull yourself out with help and you can work towards fulfilling your potential. Now, I am going to talk about my own personal story here. Again, I've mentioned it already a little bit on this podcast. In my 20s, I was lost. I drank a lot. I was angry at the world. I partied a lot. I definitely suffered from some type of depression. Now, I didn't go and seek professional help. I just moved to a different part of the world. I left the UK and went to Canada and got out of the weekly drinking and partying mode and friends that I had at that time period. And I spent a year pretty much not drinking or doing any type of partying. And I was able to really get in touch with who I am. And that year, which was around about the 30th year of my life, was probably the most important year for me to set up the direction I was going. Now, I made big changes, and that's been a massive positive in my life. And I'll say it to you now, it's been a huge positive. Looking at myself, looking at the past, looking at everything that happened, and then deciding, you know what, I want to actually try to fulfill my potential. I actually want to try to do something different with my life. I want to actually work towards something that aligns with me. And slowly but surely, over the last 10 years, I have continued to build this momentum in my life. I've gone from working crappy retail jobs to working six-figure sales jobs to working in six figures when it comes to corporate job, and now I'm building my own coaching business. So there's the happy ending, I promised. There's the happy ending after getting pretty dark in this episode of the SPS podcast. If you work on your potential, the sky is the limit. I promise you it is. It really is. The sky is the limit. Thanks very much for joining me in this deeper podcast episode about fulfilling your potential and the traps that could happen. This was the 14th episode of the SPS podcast, of the Self-Performance Strategies podcast. Again, if you have any questions at all, if you've been listening to the podcast, a regular listener over the last 14 episodes, please send me a DM on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok, wherever you find me. And that's at SteveTimoney. That's at Steve Timoney. Or you can jump on over to my website, and that's at stephentimoney.com, StevenTimoney.com. I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear what you think about this episode. I would love to hear about what you think about the traps of not fulfilling your potential and some of the direct experience that I had not fulfilling my potential. Love to hear from you. I hope you're enjoying the podcast, and we will speak to you in the next one. Make it a good one.